What is the role of a Chief Data Officer? Strange enough, I use the Chief Finance Officer as my analogy for this. Money is an important asset to a business, and so most businesses employ somebody who is a specialist, an expert in financial matters to look after that asset and to be the controlling mind around that asset. So the argument goes, if data is deemed to be an asset of the business, why wouldn't you have somebody who's a controlling mind and an expert around data? So really that is why every organisation should have a CDO. If data is an asset, you need somebody to look after it and manage it properly. In terms of tangibles and intangibles, I think data as an asset has never really been put onto the balance sheet, and I know a lot of organisations are now putting data onto the balance sheet and trying to assess the monetary value of their data, because you can resell data in certain organisations, or the value of the data that has to the business. And something that started that conversation is around insurance around data, trying to insure loss of data, and how much effort would it take to rebuild your database in terms of recollecting that data and revalidating it. So the data is becoming increasingly tangible. I think every organisation should have a figure, should have a role who is responsible for data within their organisation, be that central mind, rallying point for data to ensure governance and good use of data and best practice of data across an organisation, and can introduce the proper data tooling. Whether that person is called a Chief Data Officer or a Head of Data or a Head of Analytics, I think will depend very much on the size of the organisation, the complexity of the data sets they're dealing with. I think in a lot of people's minds, there is a big difference between a Chief Data Officer and a Chief Digital Officer. And certainly to my side of the fence, a Chief Digital Officer is about platforms and technology. It's about driving your customers or your members online into an online experience to access and interact with them through an app perhaps, rather than having them come into your office or come into your shop or interacting face to face. A Chief Data Officer is very much concerned with the data that's sitting underneath those platforms. In our book, we picked up the fact that 50% of Chief Data Officers are likely to fail, and we actually picked that figure up from Gartner, who are looking ahead, and a piece of research they did. Why are 50% of Chief Data Officers likely to fail is twofold. One is because the organisation didn't know what they wanted when they recruited a Chief Data Officer. We come in lots of different shapes and sizes, and organisations are have many different contexts, and so getting the wrong fit for the wrong job is destined to failure. They might want somebody who's more strategic, or they might need somebody who's more technology based, or somebody who's more governance based. And if you get the wrong person in the wrong place, it's going to not work. The other reason is that a Chief Data Officer very often at the moment needs to have very senior sponsorship and support. And if that sponsorship and support isn't there, very high in the organisation, because there's got to be a cultural change around data. There's often going to be business processes change. You're going to get also what we call sort of that elastoplast moment where you rip it off and say, all the data we've been looking at for the last 5 years is not right. So the two causes for failure lie in wrong person in wrong job and lack of support. It's a very interesting question how a Chief Data Officer navigates their way around a big enterprise. One of the first starting points is, who do they report to? There is no clear definition of where a CDO, Chief Data Officer, reports into. And if you do a survey across CDOs, they'll report in sometimes to the Chief Marketing Officer, sometimes the Chief Operating Officer, sometimes the Chief Financial Officer, sometimes the CEO directly, sometimes a CIO. So there's a huge variety, and that largely depends on the context or who in the organisation thought originally, we need a Chief Data Officer. I think when you land, how you navigate your way around an organisation and get buy-in to quite often quite big transformational things you want to do, it takes a number of ingredients. In the book, we identify a number of secret ingredients for a successful CDO, and one of those is very, very good communication skills, the ability to build relationships across a business, not only at board and executive level, but in the lower levels that people are actually sort of handling data at the front end of a business. Be able to create a narrative, be able to describe the vision of what you want to do with data. In other words, to take people on a journey with you to win hearts and minds. Chief Data Officer needs to be credible as well. They need to be really good at what they do and be credible if they're going to put together a new vision, a new strategy, and a lot of luck.